DCI 2022 has finally wrapped up. First full season in like 3 years, and it was an exciting finish. Not going to lie.
Yeah, I think it was exciting because there's so many close races and things that shifted around. Definitely different than what we expected in not only just like captions, but I think probably some overall placements as well. So yeah, it was entertaining for sure.
Yeah, I know you couldn't make it to finals due to a trip that conflicted with it, but I was able to go Saturday. I was there for like 5 hours in the lot pretty much, and posted a couple shorts on YouTube. Saw a bunch of people, watched probably 5 or 6 groups, but yeah, before we get into that, let's go ahead and intro this thing, and then we'll get into how our predictions turned out and all that good stuff. So, welcome everyone to the Aged Out podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me, as always, is
Evan Worrell.
and make sure you head over to LoneStarPercussion.com. Use the discount code AgedOut. Save yourself $10 on any order of $50 or more. I know we're in the swing of marching band. Drum corps wrapped up. Everyone's probably going to need some kind of gear, so head over there. They'll hook you up. Check out Facebook and Instagram. Follow us there. Head over to YouTube if you're not listening to this there. Check out the reaction videos, all the other content we post, clips from the podcasts, all that good stuff. We just posted some really awesome high-quality audio recordings. Shout out to Jared Thomas. Hooked us up with those from semis and finals day. I think we've done like Bluecoats, Boston, Cavies. Vanguard's going to go up tomorrow. That's August 20th. So by the time this comes out, it'll already be out. But yeah, head over there, subscribe, follow Instagram, Facebook. I think I hit it all. I think that's it, right?
That's it.
All right, cool. So the rundown pretty much, the plan, this shouldn't be a super long one to wrap up the season with a final thoughts podcast. I think we talked beforehand, so just to let you know what's coming throughout this thing, we're going to go back over our predictions and how those turned out with the drum averages from the 3 nights, percussion average rather. And then we're going to get into just kind of our thoughts on the last week from what we watched. Evan watched a lot of the streams. I watched the semi-stream. I was in the lot, like I said, for like 5 hours. So we'll recap that, kind of give our thoughts about what we saw, why we think things may have shook out the way they did. And then lastly, we have some, as Evan put it in a text to a friend of ours recently, he or we are at war with the judging changes that happened like 3 or 4 years ago to the drum judge not being allowed on the field. But
Yep. Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute.
we'll get into all that stuff. So how'd things turn out? I'll let you take it. And
Yeah, so I was
going
able
over
to watch the stream for both prelims and for finals or semifinals. I didn't catch finals, but overall, we got some things close. I don't think we really nailed a lot of the actual percussion placements, but we both had Boston in first, which obviously Bluecoats ended up winning. We both did have Bluecoats over BD, which did turn out to be accurate. So that was, we didn't have them in first by any means, but I'll get into that. I think that's accurate in my opinion. We'll get into that a little bit too. We both had SCV in second, which they finished third. And then we both kind of had that Blue Devils in fourth, which ultimately finished second behind Bluecoats. The averages were real close. I posted what the overall averages were. I think Bluecoats ended up edging out BD by like 0.01 on the 3-night average.
I knew they were close, but didn't know it was that close.
Really, really close. And then Vanguard wasn't very far behind that, but then there was a pretty, not sizable gap, but distinguishable gap between third to fourth where Boston was. And talk a little bit about that in a second. Crown and Cavaliers, we both had Crown in fifth and Cavaliers in sixth, which ultimately ended up flip-flopping. Cavaliers averaged a little bit higher than them on the 3 nights. Cadets in seventh, we both said that. That's where they ended up. I had Blue Stars in eighth, which was right. You had Troopers, and Troopers ended up just a little bit lower. They're in the 10 spot. Phantom ended up ninth, which I got pretty grossly wrong. You had them in 10th, so you were just like one spot off.
After I saw it, I told you, man, I just had a feeling. It's Phantom. I'd watched the, I told you before we started recording, I watched the semifinals high cam, and it's a lot of the stuff popped. Like, yeah, they were solid. Like, they were I just had a feeling when we did that predictions podcast, especially after seeing them a little bit in Atlanta. And then it was kind of reinforced when we did the reaction video to them. I was like, yeah, they're probably going to be that 10, 11, maybe even 9 where they ended up at ninth. It made sense to me.
Yeah, and they're in the 11 spot or 10 spot area. Crossman or Colts Troopers finished 10th. I had Mandarins there. You had Mandarins 11th. In reality, they ended up in the 12 spot, so not very far off there.
Nope.
I had Colts 12th. They were ultimately 11th. You had them 13th, so just a couple spots. BK, you had 14th, and that's where they finished. I had them 13th, right above Phantom. Scouts were 15th. We both had Music City in 15th, and they popped up above them. And then the rest of it pretty much shook out kind of as is. Academy 17th, then like Pacific Crest, Genesis, Jersey Surf. So not far off on the bottom end. The middle, which is what we said when we were making the predictions,
it's the toughest
part. Kind of where we got lost in the sauce.
It is so hard.
8 to 14 range really was just pretty brutal. Then my overall placements, I was pretty close overall. I had Boston winning, which they tied for second. I don't think I was really more than one spot off on anyone except for the Cavaliers. I had them in 6th, and they were 9th, so they were 3 spots down.
Ooh, I didn't know they finished that low. I didn't pay attention to the overall finishes too closely, admittedly.
Their GE, and I think it was the visual captions, really kind of tanked them. They were in like 10th in a couple of those because the Battery finished like 5th overall, and they were 5th on finals night, I'm pretty sure. Maybe Crown was ahead of them on finals. I don't know. I have to go back and look at again, those drums, we did the averages of the 3 nights, or if they only made it 2, we averaged 2.
Yeah.
And so all that was pretty fairly close. Now, I guess I will say, like, some people are saying, like, oh, you guys were like gassing up Boston all year, and it's like, you know what? We did gas Boston up all year, but I feel like it was justifiable.
We're going to get into that once we're done with these predictions. I talked to Joe Woody and Tom Gasparini in the Bluecoats finals lot for a little bit, and they kind of like ribbed me a little for like hyping Boston all summer, and I was just like, well, they were really, really good, and I still stand by. They were probably the best drumline up until finals week, and I know, again, we know front ensembles are a massive point, which is also something else we're going to get into later in when we break down judging, but yeah, I mean, we hyped them all season, and I mean, okay. Before
we weren't the only ones that hyped them all season.
Everyone was freaking out because it was worth freaking out over with how good they came out of the gate, and then good they were like by Atlanta and Allentown. But again, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Is there anything here that we just went over how wrong or right we got this stuff, or you got the overall placements? And like you said, the 8 through 14 crapshoot, good luck. I mean, they're all so close together. And honestly, looking at the top 4 of how things shook out, like basically we just had 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Like the battles were still the same. Vanguard, Boston, Bluecoats, BD, but it was flipped. Bluecoats and BD in 1 and 2, Vanguard and Boston in 3 and 4. And we said Bluecoats were going to beat BD. That happened. And then we said Boston was going to be ahead of Vanguard. That did not happen across the 3 nights. And so I guess this kind of leads perfectly into the discussion of finals week and why we think, from what we saw and heard, talking to people with our own eyes and ears, why this might have shook out this way. In my opinion, those top 4 groups are very close. And you said the recap kind of...
Yeah, I mean, the averages for those top 4, like Boston in 4th with an average of 19.33, and Bluecoats at the top with an average of 19.61. So you're talking less than 0.3 separation between those 4 ensembles.
So the way that I look at those 4 drum lines, and I got to see...
And I think Vanguard won semifinals.
Did they? I thought BD won the first 2.
No, Vanguard, I'm looking at it right now. So BD won prelims, Vanguard won semis, and Bluecoats won. The thing that averaged out is where Vanguard was 3rd in semis, and Vanguard was 3rd in prelims, and BD was 3rd in semis, and Bluecoats held 2-2 those first 2 nights, the second spot. And so then the average when they won finals night, put them just ever so slightly. Vanguard they were at a 19.55, so 0.11 or
So
point
close.
one. Yeah, so close.
So
0.1.
close. I mean,
Yeah.
so I love to hear that within those top 4 groups that they were flip-flopping. And I also love to see that I think Crown and Cavi is flip-flopped throughout the 3 nights, right? In percussion as well? Is that the case?
Yeah, it was Crown on top in quarters, Cavi's on top in semis, Crown on top in finals, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So
Although
I love to see that.
listening to the prelims tape, I think Cavaliers probably should have beat them at prelims too.
Well,
So,
that's a whole different
neither
story.
here
But
nor there.
for where I'm going with this is, where I'm going with this is, I love to see the fact that those top 6 groups flip-flopped, because that tells you the judges are evaluating. There's no slotting going on. They're evaluating the performance that night. And that's how you can end up with all that. Cavies are ahead of Crown here. Vanguard won the second night. BD won the first night. Bluecoats won the third. And that's the way it should be. So I think that, in terms of how the system is functioning, is right. But at the same time, you're splitting hairs, which makes it even more exciting. We were like biting our nails waiting for the recaps to come out every night. We're like, what's going to happen? What happened here? Like, it was wild. And so I guess the next question would be, or the first, next, whatever. Do you think Bluecoats deserve to win?
I mean, I haven't heard all the tapes for all the groups. I have heard 2 of Bluecoats tapes and 1 of Boston's tapes. And then I did hear BD. I've heard a tape of the weekend from the top 7 groups that finished.
Okay.
Whether it was prelims, semis, or finals. I've heard 2 of Bluecoats. And they're all really good. Every single one of them, they're getting called for ticks, like multiple ticks. But I do think Boston had a couple of egregious ones that ultimately sealed their fate just night 1 from making it a really big challenge for them to win the Fred Sanford.
Yeah.
And then there were some groups that had some pretty stellar front ensembles ahead of them. Not to say that Boston's wasn't good. Like I said, they were still extremely close. But just when you're splitting those hairs, there's going to be some calls that have to be made where you just got to go with what you heard. And there were some ticks in Boston in the battery solo in night 1. And I heard some people say that there was probably some similar issues in night 2 that just made it hard for them to try to bounce back from. And when you have other groups around you that they are ticking but not making a blow up mistake like that, I mean, it's pretty much gonna tell itself. The show's gonna unfold the way it unfolds.
Yep. When you're judging the show of the night and the top 4 are that close together, it's just comes down to who is more consistent. So I guess
I think Bluecoats were very clearly the most consistent group all weekend. I mean,
I would say summer, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were right there. So let's get into that.
Yeah.
People were like, oh, you're gassing up Boston. It's like, okay. So Bluecoats did win the first show of the year over Boston in Detroit in June. But then after that, they finished 4th at Broken Arrow. These are percussion finishes. 4th at Denton behind SCV Boston and Cadets. 4th at San Antonio behind SCV Boston and BD. They did win the Murfreesboro show, which was Osdemore, who had them first at finals. So he was a fan. But then they finished 4th at ATL, 2nd at the Salem show, but SCV did not perform there. 3rd in Allentown. They finished 2nd behind Boston on August 3rd. And then they won 3 shows all year. 2 of them were Osdemore shows, and the other one was the first show. I say 1-2, like when all the groups were there, like the big groups. So it's not like we were alone in predicting them in like the 3-4 range. That's pretty much how they were finishing all year up until finals week.
Yeah, and so what got me thinking a lot about this, and I think the Bluecoats deserve to win, similar along the line of thinking of what you just said of consistency. So I mentioned earlier on in the podcast that I talked to Joe Woody and Tom Gasparini. Joe taught there this summer some. Tom used to teach at Bluecoats. I marched with both of them, alumni, and they kind of like were giving me a little bit of just like friendly joking about like, you've been hyping Boston all summer. What about these guys? And I was like, dude, we said Bluecoats were good from the get-go. And so told we have you can go back and watch the first reaction video. We said they were good. And every time anyone brought it up to me, I pretty much was like, yeah, they're going to be up there at the end. They're going to be in that top 3-4 range, and it's kind of what happened. And so that conversation with them really got me thinking about how, even going into finals week, it never crossed my mind once that Bluecoats might win. I mean, we can pull up chat group conversations with people Evan and I have where we're like talking about who might win, and like they're just never mentioned. And it really got me looking at how that happened. And you said it earlier a few minutes ago, everybody was just Boston's sound quality when it was locked in was just it still was incredible finals week. They just had some tick issues, and
I would still say that watching them at the Atlanta Regional is one of the best drum lines I've ever seen live in the lot. Like
that lot right there was phenomenal. And from the Allentown videos I saw, they were phenomenal in Allentown as well. Yeah. And so it got me thinking about it and how I missed it. Well, there were I came to the conclusion there were like three major storylines following the percussion competition at the top of the world class. You had how good is BD going to actually be able to get by the end with how rough they kind of came out of spring training. And they always come out rough every year from a playing standpoint, but this year was kind of rougher than normal after the 2 summers off. Is Rennick going to win his 5th title? Because they came out and they were winning shows and they were really clean out of the gate. And then, holy crap, Boston's phenomenal. Have you heard the sound quality they play with? And like the density of notes and the velocity and just aggression. Like those were the 3 storylines. And Bluecoats were always up there. And I acknowledged, and you acknowledged throughout the season, they were very good. But those other 3 storylines, I guess, were more interesting to think about and were more intriguing to follow.
Even though it seems odd, though, even though Bluecoats have never won, you'd think that'd be like, oh, will they get their first one? But everybody's kind of like thinking, will Boston get their first Fred Sanford? Will BD creep up at the end like they always do? Will Vanguard get the 5th in a row? Because I don't think anyone's ever done 5 in a row. I know that BD did 4 in a row when I guess Tom Float was there. Maybe Fred Sanford got 5 in a row. I'd have to go back and look, but.
Yeah, well, you had those 3 storylines, and I think rightfully those were the 3 big storylines about who's going to win overall at the end. But it all comes back to that concept of peaking at the right time. What Blue Devils do so well. They pace the summer, and they get it to where you're not really ever able to think about having to maintain the level of excellence because they make the peak, and they pace it to have you peak finals week, those last 3 nights. So you don't really have time as a performer to psychologically analyze and freak out about, holy crap, we're really good. We have to maintain this level of good for 2 more weeks, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and no one's ever gotten 5. So.
It plays the mental game, and Blue Devils do it really well. And I would argue Bluecoats were right there under the surface, right below those 3 main storylines. And as the season came to an end, you know, I think Boston peaked like Allentown. I think they peaked like a week and change early. And so there could have been maybe more of that thinking about we might win. Holy crap. We're already phenomenal. Now we have to just continue to do this for another week or so. And then I think Blue Devils, I don't think BD ever got as good as they normally do. I think they were still the most improved.
And they definitely watered some very wisely so watered.
Boston watered finals week, dude.
Yeah,
Go listen to the Boston book from Atlanta and listen to it at finals week. They watered too.
Which is interesting to think about from a content standpoint. I didn't think about it beforehand, but it's like, oh, you were scoring well in this content, but then you did change things to make it easier in certain sections. And even the judges on tapes were noting like, oh, very good. What was the phrase? Or I don't want to say edits, but maybe it was something like that, like wise decisions made and some of the edits that were created, like they gave them more success from a consistency standpoint for sure.
Yeah.
But you did note that you made it easier, so now it's kind of interesting.
I think all those three groups, BD couldn't reach their peak they normally reach, maybe due to not maturity, but like just having 2 summers off, less experience within the Blue Devils system.
Right.
And then I think Boston peaked a little early, and then I think Vanguard also peaked early.
I just don't think Vanguard ever quite achieved what they normally do. They felt more vulnerable all season than the juggernaut that they usually are.
That's fair. 2 summers off. Same thing as Blue Devils, man.
They were, and we say all this too. It was still really, really good.
All 4 were incredible. Cavies were great. Crown was great.
The cadets quietly just like creeping up there and having a really good ensemble too.
Dude, I watched cadets in the lot finals day. It was really good. Like, I was like, this is really good. Like,
right,
good for them. So it was very fun to watch them live. To finish that point out, those 3 that were beating Bluecoats a lot all season kind of petered off or never quite reached the mountaintop. Whether it was Vanguard, BD, or Boston kind of peaking early, and then Bluecoats gave it that extra like 10% into finals week, and it worked out to where they were rising and achieving their peak as other groups were either falling short or falling off, whether it was mental, psychological,
and definitely the most consistent.
And so that's where I go with that consistency. They were good all year, and you saw flip-flopping. They'd beat a few groups at one show they weren't beating previously, even if they didn't win the show, depending on how well that. Just right there, right under the surface of the water. Other groups petered off, and they just stayed right there, and then went up 10%. Their finals lot was great, man. Like, I was sitting right in front of it, right next to Jared Thomas. It was.
Was that recording that you posted from finals lot?
Yes.
It's really good.
The drum set rep and the non-drum set rep. The non-drum set rep was their last standstill rep before they went to the show. And that honestly, the non-drum set rep.
It's so good to digest the show like that. Just it's raw form.
Yeah. Like, I actually kind of like listening to stuff like that without the video, because then you're really just listening to the achievement and the quality, and you're not distracted by things visually. It allows your ears to open up, or forces them to fully digest and enjoy it. But yeah, they were great. And I say that, and to piggyback on something you said earlier about even on all those groups tapes, all those top groups, tons of ticks being called.
Oh yeah.
We had a lot of, so I don't think any group got to the level this summer in terms of ticklessness or almost ticklessness that groups have 5 years ago, 4 years ago, the last few seasons before COVID. There was no clear winner, and I know my ears heard ticks everywhere. Like,
I think
Boston, Coates, Vanguard, and maybe that is understandable because you have a lot of people that haven't done a full tour for 2 seasons, so you probably have a lot more less experienced players in the line, or they're still knocking the dust off to be able to go for a 90-day season and really achieve. So
I think there's 2 factors. That one that you just said about just less people who've done it, and when you march multiple years, you just get more and more consistent. I mean, it's the way it is.
It was
and
little ticks everywhere.
Second factor, I do think that there were groups doing things to try to really push the envelope. Like, I think Boston's Battery pushed the envelope of what people thought you can write and the members can achieve from a content standpoint. I mean, it was really hard. I mean, Colin sent us the music, and some of it changed a little bit, but it was very, very difficult.
And there's difficulty that you see on the page that you're probably not going to pick up on, like minor rhythmic switches, hand speed changes that are very close, or like you just look at it written down and you go, wow.
And then I think like Vanguard with the long roll they did that started at the gut edge, and like the zone changes and the push in and push out, like that stuff's hard. They didn't quite nail it, but it is like those are things that you didn't really see before. Like, oh, this is new, this is fresh. That's a new moment. There are things that BD always does that, from an intricacy standpoint, from battery, bass to tenor to snares, it's always just very difficult to align. Bluecoats did things this summer. They played probably as much or more than anyone. From a straight just content standpoint. And then I don't know, there's just a lot of groups doing things you're like, man, that they're really trying to do something new or push the envelope in a different way or be innovative. So I think that those 2 things, being innovative and then just less experience as an aggregate, definitely created more ticks than maybe what we would hear in a normal year.
Yeah, and I think I think that will lead to, I think next season, I predict, will be another dogfight of a season among the top groups.
Yeah, somebody told me that Boston's drumline is really actually pretty young. I was like, okay.
There's a couple 18-year-olds in the snare line.
Yeah.
So I know the girl.
I think that one girl, Giovanna,
has 3 summers.
Like 3 years left or something. I think I saw her post. I was like, wow, that's a lot of band.
So Boston's going to be good. BD's going to be good like they always are. Bluecoats will be up there. Vanguard will be up there. Cavies are on the up. Crown's on the up. Like, Cadets had a good season. And I
really loved what Blue Stars did this summer.
Yes.
So
very much so. I'm a fan of what that drumline did and to see what they do next year, especially as an alum. So it's exciting. But yeah, like it was surprising though, because you watched the quarterfinals stream. I watched the semis. I think you watched some of semis as well.
Yeah.
But after quarters night, wasn't Dean Hickman in the quarters lot?
Semifinals.
Semis. Whatever it was, we were hearing reports that everybody was ticking all over the place.
Right.
Quarters night. And that just goes along with that same storyline. And we're not saying they were ticking their balls off or anything, but just little stuff flying, more common than you would hear in a usual year in those top 3 or 4 or 5 drum lines. So it was just cool. Just interesting stuff to talk about.